Infrastructure Record podcast. It's the second of our 3 specials with ReNew about the top 100 projects in Canada. And what we're going to do this week is we're going to go into the West and look at the top 3 projects. So with me I have
John Tenpenny, editor of ReNew Canada.
And let's just get started. What are the top 3, and how's it break down by region? Like what's the hotbed of infrastructure in the West?
Well, in the West, obviously the provinces of British Columbia and Alberta dominate. There are 31 of the top 100 projects are from those 2 provinces, with Manitoba and Saskatchewan adding another 3 projects. So that's where they sort of fall. Sort of break down in BC, there are 19 projects, and of those, the largest are made up of buildings, what we call buildings. And of course, of those, 7 of those 8 are hospitals. Healthcare in BC, as people in that area, I think, are aware of, is a big issue. And the government has really responded in the last few years, building healthcare facilities, mostly hospitals. So that's what's dominating in BC. In Alberta, there's more of a mix, 4 buildings, and then projects in energy, transportation, and transit, with 2 apiece. So it's a little more broadly based in that area. In terms of the big projects, the top 3 projects from Manitoba West, 2 are in BC and 1 is in Alberta, in obviously no particular order. 1 is a new project, the Iona Island Wastewater Treatment Plant in Metro Vancouver. There's also in Alberta, and Calgary's Green Line LRT is another of the top 3 projects. And rounding them out is one I'm sure everyone's familiar with. It's been on our list for a while. Is BC Hydro's Site C Clean Energy project up in Fort St. John, BC.
Right.
It's been a perennial top 10 on our top 100 list over the last number of years. As it gets closer to completion, I believe they're talking about a 24 or 25 now date on that for completion. So I guess it'll be on our list for a couple more years.
I was going to say that this top list, it doesn't. I'm sure it does change from year to year, but there's got to be repeat winners, I guess, because these are such big projects and they take so long to build, right?
Yeah, the top 10 isn't static, but it kind of remains. There's not a lot of movement, mostly because they are very large, typically energy projects that take 10 or 15 years sometimes, and are in the tens of billions of dollars, and so they remain on the list for quite a few years, such as Site C, and other projects. Transit as well. There are large GO and GTA projects. We're not going to the east yet, but BC has a few of those as well. Transit and transportation projects. I don't think any are in the top 10 right now, but they do show up on the list. So yeah, there are quite a few number of projects. I don't know if I mentioned in our previous podcast, but this year we had 13 new projects, and 13 projects fell off the list, mostly due to substantial completion. Although I can mention in the West, in BC, the North Shore wastewater treatment plant in Vancouver. I don't know if I'm sure you're familiar with that project. They had some issues with their contractor, and this Metro Vancouver actually terminated the contract. So that project is not complete, hold. So therefore, it's off the list for this year until it gets back and gets started up again. So.
Now, you mentioned hospitals, and I was just wondering if, and this is more of a statistics question really than anything else, did COVID push that number higher in a way that's noticeable on your list, or B, does it work out that that's something you're going to see a couple years down the road because of people starting stuff now, or both?
I would say both. In terms of hospitals, of the 13 new projects, 5 of them were healthcare facilities, mostly hospitals, and I think 3 or 4 of those were from BC, specifically in the West region. So, and Ontario has a few, but I'd have to say that the West is sort of leading in terms of new projects. Although, once again, not to dip in Ontario, but I think Ontario will be coming. I think there's been a lot of talk and some recent project announcements and things that I think healthcare in Ontario is gonna get a big boost in the next few years. But certainly in the West, it's already happened, and I can't speak to all the little reasons about that. I don't know that region quite as well, but certainly the government has made a big push. So they've had hospitals and healthcare facilities on the list for a few years, and like I said, there were 4 new ones in BC alone this year that made our list. So they're really pushing that, and I'm sure COVID has had some to do with that. I mean, in the early days of COVID, hospitals all across the country were having issues, and I think it alerted governments to some of their capacity issues in hospitals and healthcare facilities, especially in large urban areas like Vancouver or Calgary or Edmonton, and so that's maybe partly why there's been an extra push. But certainly healthcare, I think, is always a good list. Hospitals don't take as long as, say, hydroelectric projects, but some of those hospitals, especially when they're brand new from the ground up, can take anywhere from 5 or more years, depending.
Besides healthcare, are there any other trends that you see that kind of in sharp relief in the list this year, or in contrast to previous years in the West?
I'd have to say no, nothing really, other than, like I said, some extra healthcare facilities. Nothing is really, like I said, large energy projects tend to stay on the list, so they don't get added as often. Transportation, there were 5 projects in BC on the top 100 under transportation. One of those includes the new George Massey tunnel project that was recently announced. So that's another large transportation project that'll be on the list for a few years. And of course, we had the preceding George Massey bridge project on our list for a few years before it was canceled. Right. Yeah. And that happens sometimes too. Projects get funded and actually start, and then for whatever reason, I think in BC's case, a new government came to power, decided that was not the project they wanted, canceled it, and then it took them a few years to figure out what they wanted to do, and now they've decided on a tunnel. So I mean, I think the bridge project would actually have been completed last year if it had if it had continued and not been canceled. But now the tunnel's on the board, and I think that's I think it's about an 7 or 8 year project. So.
Okay, and if you want to listen to the third part, where we look at Ontario and parts east, tune in next week. Until then, you can listen to us on Amazon Music, Spotify, and Apple Music, and on the Daily Commercial News and Journal of Commerce websites. Thanks for listening, everybody.